but we had it built in the contract that they report to the Toleok HTO, and we contact the Toleok HTO for reporting. So that's kind of how we work. But there's a bunch of examples like that, and again, the only reason we don't do more is finding that perfect mix of capacity, willingness, availability, and trust.
Yeah,
is one.
Okay. So moving on, what's your experience in Nunavut working with wildlife co-management as an environmental NGO representative, really? How do you work with like the HTOs, the RWOs, and Nunavut Wildlife Management Board?
Yeah, so we try to acknowledge who we are and the limits and I can't think of the word, but the mistakes of the past of ENGOs in general. We don't hide behind the fact that maybe WWF hasn't been the worst ENGO in the world, but we are part of an ENGO movement, and we're part of something that hasn't been done right for a long time, and probably history will say we're still not doing it right now, but always trying to do better. And we do that by putting our money where our mouth is and supporting HTOs whenever possible. But to get to that stage, our first level of engagement is usually advertising through going to regional wildlife organization meetings, going to NWMB hearings, participating in the NLUP process, NWMB hearings, just said, sorry, and that kind of thing, and showing our rationality in terms of our approach, and also offering support, because we need people to approach us in order for us to work with them.
Yeah.
But it's been a great model, and I find, especially living in Nunavut, there are many HTOs that when you get to know them, you can work directly with them. You can go to the HTO meeting. You can hear their concerns and come up with a plan. So we are not in the land claim, obviously, in terms of we need to request standing for all the processes we do, but we I can't think of an example where we weren't granted standing, and that's where we meet and we identify kind of partners that have similar goals to us, or every now and then with a very different goal, but a need. But largely we try to work within our own goals as well.
Sure. And I've seen kind of your role in that, just from my personal experience seeing you at meetings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I guess what's your role in the research side of what you're doing? I saw those videos that you posted of the sperm whales.
That's cool, yeah.
Really neat.
So it's a bit of a fundraising tool, but it's also a research tool. The Arctic Species Conservation Fund is how it's labeled, and that's really accessible to people, for us to be able to raise money, to be able to support research. But what's important is it's not the Arctic Species Research Fund, it's a conservation fund, because it also includes stewardship actions, like all the projects I just mentioned, Ininaqua, KRWB, QWB, BQCMB, those all come from that fund. So they're not flashy, they're not sperm whales in Eclipse Sound, so they don't really get communications. They're also not our intellectual property, so it's not what we communicate on, but we do also have just some scientific research projects, but we do try to, in our criteria evaluation, it's community relevance always. So the one you're talking about is responding to huge community concerns in North Baffin about ships in narwhal, and it's an underwater acoustic device to try and get at the idea of what's happening with narwhal with ships coming through. Total scientific study, there's no traditional element to it. It's still important, but it's just kind of the other facet, because if you look at what WWF is, it's a science-based organization. It's always going to say that. So there is still a scientific element to our work. So again, we're a funder, and we join projects sometimes, but I'm out of the research game myself. WWF is a smaller show than people will think it is.
Yeah. Okay. So in Nunavut, this concept of Inuit Kamaitokani is discussed all the time, and it's talked about as being important to the wildlife co-management process and an important aspect of what should be considered when management decisions are made. So what does that term or concept actually mean to you when you hear it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think people often don't think about what it means to them. They just kind of take it for what it is. To me, it means Inuit. I mean, I know Inuit knowledge is more direct translation, but I think of it more as Inuit perspective sometimes, because I think when I think of the word knowledge, I limit it to like something that is taught, or something that is owned, or something that is like really developed in an academic setting. So perspective is not meant to diminish it at all. It's more to make it more encompassing of everything that it is when they bring it forward. I don't think Inuit knowledge is just stuff, or Inuit Kaitumakangit is just on a map. I think it's also the perspective, the broader perspective, the historical perspective, the cultural perspective, the family level perspective, like everything that they bring to, or an Inuit person can bring to sharing their IQ. I think it is also each of those individual things in terms of it could be that place-based, very specific, data-friendly information, but it's also just a wider cast of information than knowledge would be in terms of like Western knowledge.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Okay. So, in the meetings you've observed, the hearings, all of this other stuff, in any research settings that you've been in, how have you observed Inuit Kamayatukangit or Inuit knowledge being drawn upon or presented to the wildlife management process?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, it's a lot easier, it seems, for it to be drawn upon when there's two different qualitative information all being presented at the same time, and I think researchers are always keen for qualitative stories and qualitative explanations of things in terms of trying to understand distribution shifts or patterns or that kind of thing where there isn't really data but there's interesting observations of what's going on. But I see a real breakdown when we start talking about numbers, like population numbers, and then IQ is drawn upon as well, but it just doesn't line up in the same way, and the number is still just put there, and it just hangs above the room as this thing, and IQ kind of circles around it, but never really gets to it, and it's not IQ's fault, and it's not really the number's fault, but it's just even, let's just say that I've been not shocked, but I've been a little surprised in how, even going to the NWMB, how numbers reliant they are when making decisions. It seems like decisions are often made on numbers, and then varied with IQ varies the response a little bit. Yeah. In terms of bringing it up or bringing it down, and that could be anything from a quota to TAA, same thing. Or
I got grilled on the number.
Yeah, I can't think of other. You know what I mean, though. Like, it seems still that every explanation is based on a numerical value, but we also considered IQ, so we adjusted the number, but it's not really getting away from the fact that the number is held very high. Yeah. I can't really say that I've encountered much IQ that was numerical. Yeah. Maybe I have, but I can't think of an example right now. So it's interesting because it seems to be held to a lot higher and considered a lot more when there's no real decision and it's an explanation of things, and it's readily accepted as explanation of phenomena. Yeah. And it is incorporated, I find, in decision making, but I still find like you almost need to justify the number that you've heard when making a decision, and the number seems to, the scientific knowledge seems to kind of maintain its integrity at all times. Yeah. And even it's just been not as co-managed as I maybe thought it would be. Yeah. But
so in a way, you're saying that a lot of what you're hearing is, maybe rephrase what you said, is it's presented in kind of a story form, or like this, my experience is this, as opposed to I saw X number of caribou, and I have a feeling that there's X number of caribou out there.
Or I've never heard an Inuit knowledge holder be like, I think that number is wrong because I think it's actually this. Yeah. And I mean, I don't expect anyone to do that, regardless of their way of knowing, but it seems to be, there's usually like one numerical perspective put forward. There's never like competing numbers put forward, and it's not competing IQ put forward, but it's multiple accounts of IQ put forward. So I don't know if that means that you have like sample size of 1, so it sits here, and then sample size of 15 IQ perspectives, and they're all compared against one non-IQ perspective, but it just seems like there's not that they're competing with each other at all, but they almost blend in a way that makes them